the feedback you get in tech is generally pretty good, especially if you're taking the time to go into like a a pretty decent company. So there really is no reason to kind of like going through this first one to be defensive with feedback, right? There's really no reason for you not to be completely open and treat feedback as a gift. And I've gotten this feedback as well. I've gotten this feedback from multiple managers now. They're like, "Hey, Alex, like you're just really good at like just taking in feedback. Like there's pretty much no barrier to entry for like me giving you the feedback. You don't really push back on it. You just kind of take it and apply it like immediately." And I'm like, yeah, like why would I not do that? Right. It's just free growth advice. It's free learning advice. Right. So I think like once you truly master this concept, which we'll talk about now, like your growth will really skyrocket. It is a bit tricky because sometimes you do have to kind of proactively reach out to get feedback. Some managers might not be so like kind of forgiving about giving you feedback proactively. Um, but yeah, let's first talk about processing feedback. So yeah, number one, don't be defensive. It's very easy to be defensive when you get constructive criticism because like people don't like being told that they're not doing something like completely right, myself included, right? I still get that instinct with some pieces of feedback sometimes. It's important to temper that. Of course, sometimes the feedback is not completely accurate, but that's more like that's more of an exception than the rule where like a piece of feedback is like just genuinely like very misguided. That's maybe like from my experience maybe 5% of the time. It's quite low, right? The vast majority of the time you should just be like, this is great feedback, thanks for the feedback, I completely understand, I'm going to incorporate it, right? You try to put yourselves in their shoes and be like, okay, why did they give you this piece of feedback? You just assume good intent, you assume that they're correct. And this is something, again, this is another exercise in empathy, this feedback phase, because the person giving constructive feedback, they're also a bit skittish, right? Because like you don't know how someone is going to react when you give them constructive feedback and advice on how to improve. Because again, like I think people naturally don't like being told that they're imperfect in some way, right? And they realize this, and they go, oh, well, yeah, when I get feedback, I get this kind of weird instinct, right? So they probably do it. So as the feedback receiver, you should keep this in mind, right? Put yourselves in their shoes, which can be tricky because again, you're the one being criticized. But I think this is like really, when it comes to the exchange of feedback, this is like really the time for you to go kind of above and beyond as a human in terms of this emotional intelligence. So yeah, keep that in mind. And when you get constructive feedback, you should, again, don't be defensive. You just accept it with open arms and thank them, right? Like feedback is a gift. When you receive gifts, you thank the person who gave you the gift, right? And of course, write it down. It can be really easy to lose stuff in tech. Like just like you learn something or you get told something and you forget it because tech is just moving so fast. Again, this is one of the unique aspects of tech. Writing important stuff down is such a cheat code in tech. Like Rahul and I write down stuff constantly, including managing this community because there's just like so much stuff going on. Yeah, the next thing is when you get feedback, oftentimes it'll be something more high level. They'll be like, oh yeah, I feel like you're not active enough in meetings or something like that. That's like relatively high level. That you cannot really convert that directly into like something you can really change your behavior with. So whenever you get feedback, you try to convert it into a concrete action item. So like with this, you're not active enough in meetings example, converting it could be something as simple as the team weekly meeting, I will try to say at least one thing every meeting, right? I will try to give my opinion on at least one thing, right? And that's an example of turning feedback into something that like concretely manifests in a behavior change on your part. And then yeah, if we like move on, we have the kind of the edge case. So as mentioned before, there you are going to get feedback sometimes, rarely, that is like maybe not framed very nicely, like it's too harsh or it's like genuinely misguided. In this case, there's a couple things that you can do. You can talk to their superior. So usually talk to their manager. Talking to the manager is, I feel like in tech, is a surprisingly effective tactic. So yeah, you shouldn't be afraid to talk to someone's manager if you feel like this person, okay, genuinely has been like pretty hurtful or like just really doesn't understand what I'm doing. And then if you're not able to do that, or you are able to do that, you can kind of augment it with what I call a crucial conversation. This is kind of a concept that is really drilled into our brains at Facebook. But the idea is like you shouldn't be afraid to have hard conversations. So like if you want to talk about feedback, you want to give someone like really like kind of cogent, constructive feedback, it might be worth just talking with them in person and just really going through and then kind of being clear, like, okay, yeah, this is, this is the problem I see. Like, these are my feelings around it. This is my perspective. Like, really kind of be as vulnerable as possible in this conversation, to really communicate your viewpoint and really ask them for their viewpoint. Yeah, Rahul, anything to add here?
One thing I'll add is that you are empowered. You choose the people around you, right? Um, so if you feel like there is a regular pattern of the feedback that you're receiving from the key people on your team is not constructive and it's only intended to other you or to make you feel like you're not sufficient, that is something that isn't okay. And then you should act either doing what Alex said, talking to a superior, like actually having a conversation with them, like the impact that their feedback is having on you and how it's not productive. Or sometimes the easiest thing to do is just switch teams or leave the company. Um, I think that if you're on your own and you're part of a community, then it's actually fairly easy. If there's not that much attachment, you just find another online community. Like just don't hang out on that subreddit or on that Twitter thread or like, in whatever online community you're part of. If you're part of a company, it's a little bit harder because you probably have some amount of tie or there's some obligations to the company. But still, like nothing is worth, if you feel like you're truly not being supported,